Hello and welcome to the Sound Banking Podcast. This is your host, Kyle Reese, and your co-host, Raymond Ward. In this episode, we just talk about the purpose of our podcast, our background, and the importance of understanding life insurance and the financial system. We really don't have a script or anything that we are necessarily intending to talk about, but we just wanted to take a little bit of time to start this off as our first episode, introduce ourselves, and go from there. Right?
Yep. We just thought we'd talk about maybe a little bit about how we got connected and reconnected. Actually, it was back February of 2020. Was Nelson Nash Institute
2019.
Yep.
I think
it would have been 2019.
Yeah, 2019 was the year I went.
Okay. Oh yes. Well, what month was that? What month?
I'm pretty sure it was February. I'm almost positive it was February. And I was not an IBC practitioner, not an authorized practitioner through the Nelson Nash Institute. I was still in the learning phase. Were you a practitioner at the time?
Yes, I had become a practitioner by that time.
Okay.
Yeah, I had got my life insurance license, went to a national convention for the IMO that I was with, and somebody came out on the stage and said, "You got to come to St. Augustine to learn how to help people get out of debt." And when I was there, the guy that had put this on, somebody in the crowd said something to him about becoming your own banker, and he quickly didn't want to talk about it. And that got my attention, him wanting to cover it up a little bit. So we ended up finding out all about NNI. I came home and I shared this information with a friend of mine who's got his degree in Austrian economics. He got a master's over in Spain. And I shared it with him, and he came back and said, "Hey, did you know that there was this Nelson Nash Institute?" And I said, "No." And he said, "One of my professors from the Austrian school is on the board."
Oh, no way.
And I said, "Who is that?" And he said, "Bob Murphy, Dr. Bob Murphy. He's got his PhD in economics." And I said, "I know Bob." And so we just went down that rabbit hole. And this friend of mine said, "I've been looking for this my whole life." So that was a great response to hear.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's funny because you mentioned the first time we met was at the Nelson Nash Institute. I was so new to all of that. You know, the whole scene was brand new to me. I hadn't been in insurance for more than a year and a half, I think. And I was just meeting a bunch of people. And I don't even remember meeting you there. My first recollection of us meeting was just a few months ago when we were on that Nelson Nash Institute meeting with just on Zoom. And we somehow, out of 50, 60 people, got put in the same room. There were three of us, and you're like, "I know you," and I'm like, "I don't know you." And then we started talking, and and you reminded me of a few things. You worked with my brother back in the years a while ago, and it was kind of interesting to reconnect and establish that relationship. So we talked a little bit briefly after that Nelson Nash conference call that we were on several months back, and said, opening 2024, let's reopen a conversation about maybe doing a joint project together. And that's kind of how this podcast came about. What was your thoughts with all of that?
Yeah, I thought it was not coincidental that we came together like that. For me, it was at a time when I had talked to somebody else about doing one, and we had all these sputtering starts, and it never seemed to gel. And so then one day he called and said, I think that I'm going to take a pass on this. I just don't seem to have the time or whatever. And I was feeling the same exact way. And then when you and I met, I had been thinking, for the last couple of months that I'd like to do a podcast with somebody,
Mm-hmm.
and then when we met in that room, I was just, oh my God, this is Kyle. And then I shared with you, about possibly talking and then doing and then we ended up talking about doing a podcast. And I was like, this is amazing that we're both on the same path. And we just kind of merged into it, started going down the road together. It was just wonderful.
Yeah,
I couldn't say
that is
enough.
pretty cool. So how long have you been an authorized practitioner with the Institute?
I want to say that I became a practitioner when in June of 2019. Yeah, we're gonna have to look back at your records. You saying that we were
Perfect.
there in February of 2019, because I don't believe I got my license until April of 2019.
You might be right. You might be right. You know what? That's funny. You are right. I was getting my dates mixed up. But the
Yeah,
date that I started insurance was close to when, was shortly after my son was born, and he was born in 2018. And I forgot I was doing insurance for a year and a half um, before going to the IBC think tank, not 6
yeah,
months before. So that's right. You're right. 2020.
yeah.
So it was almost
So
4 years ago now.
it was almost, 4 years. Let's see, it was 2019, um, June. So what do we got now? 23. So that was 4 years. It was 4 years this past June.
Yeah,
So four and a half years now,
that's
which is
awesome.
amazing. I can't even believe that much time has gone by. Yeah.
Yeah, my journey through the Nelson Nash Institute was slightly different. It sounds like when you learned about it, you jumped right in and became a practitioner pretty quick. Um, and
Yeah.
you mentioned how you found out about the Nelson Nash Institute was by going to um, that national conference, learning how to help people get out of debt, basically.
Yeah.
And I learned about the Nelson Nash Institute before that. You and I were both at that same IMO we were talking about. We
Hmm.
both went to that national convention there to learn about getting people out of debt. I think I went to one several weeks after you did, but we both kind of watched the same thing. And I had the same vibes because he wouldn't talk about becoming your own banker, and I had already read Becoming Your Own Banker. The reason why I read it was because my dad had gone through the process of learning how to replace his mortgage and everything, the whole first lien HELOC, all of that. Um, and so he had started studying, like, what else is there out there, besides a mortgage, besides the traditional banking system that we all know, right?
Right.
And he stumbled upon some videos from a couple practitioners within the infinite banking world, stumbled across Nelson Nash's stuff, and he got the book, started reading the book, and he started going down the path of becoming a practitioner. And he sent me the book. He's like, dude, you got to read this. And so I read it. I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then I attended a live seminar that one of the practitioners was doing, and that completely rocked my mind. It's like, wow, this is everything I've been looking for from a financial standpoint. This is freedom. This is it's power, control, you name it.
Mm.
Anything good that can be in finances can be found here. And I was just floored. And so I was like, I committed to learning this, right? I started reading Becoming Your Own Banker again. I think I read it 5 times that first year. It's a good
Good for
book.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I was following a guy asked me if I would be willing to, or that guy who I had attended his seminar, he was a young practitioner, had been doing it for a couple of years, and he had asked me if I would be willing to, um, if I wanted to study under him, and I was like, absolutely, I want to learn this. And so I was reading everything that he was giving me, and it was really awesome. I learned a ton from him, and that was Ryan Griggs. And
Mm.
I didn't go through the process of becoming a IBC practitioner for about 3 years, because I was just studying and learning and applying it. And I was writing whole life IBC policies, but I wasn't doing it as an authorized practitioner. I had the
Yeah.
knowledge and the understanding. But then I finally was like, you know what? I'm just going to do this. I want to support Nelson's, his legacy. That's the Nelson Nash Institute. Um, I may get something out of it. I may not. I learned quite a bit going through that course, but
Mm.
again, I had a pretty good foundation from Ryan's teachings and everything. So that was really awesome. But yeah, I didn't become an actual practitioner until last January, so a year ago from now.
Oh, wow. Well, good for you. Yeah, there's lots of people that have come to know about this and have learned it and have been practicing many, many years more than we have, that are not practitioners.
Hmm.
So you don't necessarily have to, but the principles I think are very important. That Nelson was trying to teach and share, um, not just around life insurance, but how we think about everything around finances.
Hmm.
And that's really what I got out of it. Like the famous book, that you have there behind you, Becoming Your Own Banker. The first half of the book is just about human psychology and how we move through the world. And that is fascinating to me. Only because at one point in my life I thought I wanted to be a psychologist. You know, the human mind it's a vast frontier.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is. So, in this podcast, what do you want people to get out of it on a general basis?
That's a great question, and I'm glad that you posed the question as a want. Um, I would like to see people come to this wanting to know what we have learned about whole life and how it truly works. And in that, most of the information why didn't I find out about it? I'm
Hmm.
years along in my life, and it was never brought to my attention that this was available. Why not? So wanting to get the information to people in a format or in a way, in a certain set of words that you might say in a certain way, that they really understand and really can absorb what it is that this really is. It's not like rocket science or anything. It's just a matter of being open to thinking in a different way, or maybe getting rid of some thinking that we have around whole life. Most of it's snippets that we hear from our friends and family, and really dig in. Don't even necessarily take our word for it. Just go ahead and dig into it yourself if you want to. Read books and watch podcasts and listen to us, listen to others, but ultimately that they can take control of their financial life and protect everything that they love. Really. Um,
Hmm.
yeah. How about you? What do you want out of this for folks that come?
Yeah. When I asked you the question, it's kind of funny because I don't really know the answer. I think that you said it well. I want people to have a resource that is consistent to what Nelson taught, that is in a way that they can understand. There's so many podcasts out there. There are so many practitioners out there. And there's so many insurance agents out there that aren't even IBC practitioners. There's a lot of noise, as Nelson would call it, when it comes to infinite banking. And I might absolutely love Ryan Griggs' style of communication and James Nethery's style of communication. The Banking with Life podcast is fantastic, right? And that's just one of them. There's a bunch of other ones, but it's not always exactly what someone needs. If I'm talking with an individual, they've come to me because I like to talk. They like the way that I communicate. We all have different communicating methods and everything. And I would love to have a plethora of resources to be able to refer people to that gives the information in a concise manner, that I also know can be relied on. There's always going to be something that someone else says that you can't control, right? And so if you're always, or I should say, if I am always, encouraging my clients or my prospective clients to go over and listen to so-and-so's podcast or this episode of this or whatever, they might hear something that's not in alignment with my value set, right? There's always a little bit of nuances. And so having something that is mine, that is yours, that's ours, that we can kind of control how we communicate, that will just give us a resource to be able to share with other people to improve their lives. And like you mentioned, I want to help people see that all you need is to be open. All you need to do is be open to the other options that are out there. I thought I understood the financial world, right? From a young age, I thought I did, because I grew up in a very responsible financial upbringing and training and all that kind of stuff. Oh my gosh. When I learned about infinite banking, I was like, I have been lied to a lot by a lot of people who didn't know they were lying, right? But
Right.
the
Yes.
truth about how money works, totally different than
Yeah.
what a lot of the information would suggest out there. So having
Right.
just an authentic resource and helping people kind of open up their minds to what are the options. Another thing you mentioned was how whole life works. I want people to understand how term works, how IUL works, how whole life works, how single premium works. I want people to understand from a very broad strokes view what life insurance is. And I think Nelson said it the best, or maybe it was James. I don't remember who it was. But my understanding of life insurance is most likely based on someone else's misunderstanding of life insurance. I want to break that barrier.
That's a great goal. Yeah. Um, yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned the IULs and all of those, and term too. Term has a place, and maybe we could talk sometime about IULs and how they really work. They're basically a whole life on a different chassis.
Yeah.
So they, yeah. So they the thing that I find interesting is that the industry has categorized those products as whole life products.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I talk about, I'm sharing information about whole life, people could immediately think of an IUL.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not remotely, well, I shouldn't say not remotely. It is in the same ballpark maybe, but it's not the same product. It doesn't function the same way.
Yeah.
It doesn't grow the same way. It doesn't collapse the same way.
Great
And
point.
yeah, yeah. Interesting. A quick little story about that. I had a meeting with a young gentleman. He's first year college, and he and his fiance are going to get married in the spring. And she is a client of mine. She's my youngest client. She started a policy while she was in high school.
That's awesome.
And they're getting married. So we met and we talked, and I was talking about the IULs and saying, that's not what we do, and for certain reasons, and they do have their place if you have a particular strategy with a particular person.
Yep.
But anyway, during the conversation, he just pipes up and says, one thing that was interesting when I looked at the illustration was that when I got into my 70s, the cash value started to go down.
Right when you need it.
And I said, well, yeah, right when you need it. And I said, well, that's the beginning of it cannibalizing itself, depending on how it was funded, and how long it was funded. Now that term rider that's inside of it is starting to eat away at it. And when you get into your 80s, hang on.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I look forward to having more conversations about the IOL in the future, because that is
Yeah.
one of I think, the biggest farces that is out there right now in our current environment. Is people's there's a lot of agents out there that are not intentionally doing this, but they're miscommunicating the value of an IUL. And like you said, it has its place, but
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of people who don't understand how it works, who own policies, and they'll be in for a rude awakening. So yeah, that'll be a good. I think that's a full podcast episode right there.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
definitely. Yeah.
Well,
I always think of, when you think about the understanding, when somebody has the light bulb go off and say, okay, I really get this. I always think of, when I first heard Todd Langford talk, and he said, if people really understood how this particular product, whole life that we're talking about, really worked, they would be lining up around the block to get as much as they could.
mm-hmm.
And I was like, and that was like before I really understood what it was. But man, he was so right.
Yeah, it's so funny. The more I've been around it, the more I've become less enamored with it and more impressed with it. Originally, I was like, why would I ever do anything other than this? Well, I can give you 100 reasons why I would do things other than this. This isn't the answer for every single financial question. Okay.
Right. Right.
But this is the foundation that a lot of financial questions can be answered from. Right. And so I am more impressed with it as a foundational piece,
Hmm.
to the financial, to anyone's financial life strategy, whatever. But again, it doesn't answer every question. So yeah, less enamored and more impressed, if that makes
That's a
sense.
great analogy. Great way of putting it.
And I haven't had a single client get an IBC policy who doesn't understand it. I've had plenty of people that will talk with me. I try to do my best. They may not be open. I might be using the wrong words for them. Who knows? But I've talked with plenty of people who decide that they don't want infinite banking. And I'll just say 10 out of 10 times they think they understand it, but they don't understand it.
Right.
They might grasp 90% of it, but that 10% that they're missing, whatever 10% it is, it changes everything,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's the foundation of which you lift off onto other things. You
Yeah.
know. Um, I recently started a policy on myself at an older age. Most people would say that's crazy, to be starting it then. But number one, I still need a place to store cash, and number two, it increased my estate exponentially, like overnight.
There you go.
So
That's
I'm
awesome.
not going anywhere until I go.
Yeah. I started my first policy when I wasn't making money, and I built it too big for me to afford. People are like, why'd you do that? I was like, because I won't look back regretting that I started my financial foundation in infinite banking. I won't look back on with regret at a policy if I couldn't fund it all the way. But if I had more money in the future and wanted to put it to my IBC policy, I will regret not being able to do that. That would be a bummer, a big bummer.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
weird. That was a weird decision. I'm glad
Yeah.
I did it though.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll pay dividends down the road.
Literally.
Yeah. Literally. Yes. Yes.
Well, tell me a
Um,
little bit about you. I mean, if I may, kind of as a person, and I'll give a little bit of information about me as a person, so our listeners can kind of get an idea of who we are, and maybe let's just wrap it up with that. How does that sound?
it sounds great, Kyle. I was born just outside of Boston, grew up in southern New Hampshire. Um, I I loved sports growing up. I did not go to I didn't go to college right away. I ended up putting myself through college later on. Uh, but I did a bunch of traveling when I was young. Um, Came back and a year later, 2 years later, and started to go back to school. And then when I was almost 30, I think, and I met my wife. And 3 years later, we got married, and 6 years later, we had a daughter, and we were raising her. And then about 9 years, when she was 9 years old, I had learned about a school here in Iowa, small school in a small town here that was really unique. And I thought if we could somehow manage it, we would end up moving there. And so we did. Uh, and my daughter went to this school just for a year. It turned out that it wasn't quite what we had expected. Yeah, it was too bad. I had read a couple of books and I thought, my God, this is great if just half of it's true. And not to say that half of it wasn't true, but just academically it wasn't. So she ended up going to public school,
Okay.
and she did really well. And we struggled because here in Iowa, small town, we didn't know anybody. We had no family, no friends, and it's very tight knit community. And so we struggled for a while with jobs and all that kind of stuff. Um, when I was in New Hampshire, I had learned how to build houses, and I also I started and built a landscape company for almost 20 years. Sold that and then moved here. So I did a little landscaping when we first got here and managed to survive. And my daughter went off to college and has done very well for herself. She's in New York City right now, working in the city. And my wife and I are home with the two cats and a little dachshund running around. We call him the low guy. He's down low.
Yeah, they are.
uh, yeah, and I had been doing construction work around here, handyman kind of stuff, remodeling and all that. And again, not to harp on it, but I started thinking about, okay, my daughter's gone. We've always done a good job and all that stuff. And at some point, physically, I'm not going to be able to do this work. I want to work forever. I mean, I don't have any intentions of retiring. I like to work. I like to stay
Mhm.
busy. Might take more trips and do more fun things, but for the most part, I'm going to keep moving. So I started looking around, thinking, okay, what could I do? And my brother mentioned um, this IMO, this insurance group, and so I just thought that's an interesting thing. So that's how that all started. Um, so I still do a little bit of handyman work and everything because I do like to work with my hands and keep active. But I do love talking about this. I can't. It's almost like I can't stop talking about it.
Yeah, I'm the same way, man.
Yeah. So
Well,
anyway,
awesome.
that's the short of my story. Yeah. How about you, Kyle? I know you got a lot going on.
Oh man, a lot going on. Yeah, so I was raised in a strong conservative Christian home. And I'm one of 5 kids, all born within 6 years. Grew up working on our property, working jobs as soon as we were able, basically, working ranches in the summertime, at different times during high school and whatnot. I really liked working. It was, um, uh, I just enjoyed it, reviving for me, I guess you could say, working physically. But at the same time, it was my whole childhood, and I'm good on computers. And so I was like, I want to live the city life. I grew up in the country. I want to go to the city, So after working a couple more labor jobs, I went into a management style job doing electrical construction, project management stuff. And I did that for a little while. I was raised in Northern California, went to the Bay Area for this project management gig. And that's where I met my wife, was over there in the Bay Area. Now we live up here in Montana. We've got 3 kids. The fourth is on its way in May. So I think, like, what, 4 months left for that.
Yeah.
So that's exciting.
Yeah.
Um,
Very.
yeah. So I was on my, uh, I've been reading leadership and personal development books since I was 12, 13 years old. And I eat them up. That's what I love. I don't care for fiction. I like, how do we make a difference in the world? And I've been that way since I was young. I can't take any credit for it.
Yeah.
It's just the way I was built. So I I thought that the corporate world, the corporate ladder, was the path for me. I didn't want college. I was just going to work my tail end off and make it happen. Well, the my first child, Hudson, was born, and everything changed. My whole perspective about life completely shifted, and I'm like, what am I doing? I'm working tons of hours and always available for this company I'm working with. And it's great. I love the work. I truly love the work. But what's the impact? What's the long term legacy? What am I going to be leaving? And I didn't see it being necessarily a good thing. And so my wife and I decided to quit. That's when I learned about that IMO, the same one you and I worked with. And I went over there and started selling life insurance. I was doing it part time while I was still working. And I was like, I can't do this. So I'm just going to quit. I had saved up enough money, quit, moved in with my folks. And they had an outbuilding that we were able to rent from them. So that was pretty cool. Have our own space out in the country again. My wife and my mom are like best friends. So it worked out on every part. And the that's when I learned about infinite banking. Actually, the day, my last day was a Friday, working with that company, and that evening was the seminar that I attended for infinite banking. So it was transition right into all of this, and then I learned the value of whole life insurance and how it could be used to really change someone's life while they're living, not just after they die. And I was like, well, I don't really feel comfortable about just being a mortgage protection term salesman. I want to be able to tell people what this is all about. So that's when I dove into learning it. Well, I'm young. Not everybody wants a super young person's perspective on finances and how to set up yourself for long-term finances. And I had a hard time getting a client base. So went into a couple other entrepreneurship ventures, and I've learned a lot about business, especially how they can fail, um, over the last 4 years. And that's
Yeah.
put us in a unique position. We're up here in Montana. I have seen the ups, and I have seen the downs, the really downs, the super negatives of finances. I've experienced them personally. And while it's not fun to go through, I also have seen that it has given me a perspective to be able to help people with and empathize with folks who are not necessarily in the best position. People ask me what infinite bank, if infinite banking is only for the wealthy. And I tell them, no, infinite banking is only for the people who are open-minded. It doesn't matter what money you have. As long as you're closed-minded, if you're rich, don't do this. If you're poor, don't do this. If you're open-minded and you're willing to learn, and you want to take ownership for the future of your life, infinite banking's for you no matter how much money you have. And since I've been on both sides, I've been able to understand that a little bit more than I would have. So that's
Yeah.
me in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great story. Great path. Um, well, when I think about people coming to this and asking them to have an open mind, it isn't just about life insurance to have an open mind, because there's a lot. I would like to, when we talk about what we want out of this, I would want to share with people about why you want to look at this. And
Yes.
I think one of the ways that I came to it, well, of course, I just understood it really quickly. For some weird reason, I got it really quickly. And so I just jumped in. That's not the case for a lot of people, but that there's a reason that you might want to look at this, because you might not understand the system that you're already in. That you think that you might understand it. You go, you write a check, or you give them your credit card and everything's fine. My paycheck goes in. But if you don't really know, the rules of the monopoly board, let's call it, you're definitely vulnerable to somebody
Mhm.
that does, or somebody that can take advantage of you, and you wouldn't even necessarily know about it. And I think that is going on all the time around us. And as a result, most Americans or middle class folks are struggling financially, and they really don't have to.
Yeah.
But it's learning about all the things that's going on around them that they might not understand as well, and give them a good reason to actually really look at this.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's awesome. And I think we should put a pin in that and say, let's talk about, I mean, whether it's the next time we sit here and record, or the following, um, an
mm,
episode dedicated to why people should look into infinite banking might be a good thing,
I
because
think that's a
there's some reasons
great.
people should. There's a lot of good reasons.
I think that's a great next, discussion, because
Good deal.
I think that's really what can motivate people to want to look at it, if they understand why they should be looking at
Yeah.
it.
No, you're absolutely right. Well, awesome. I think that about wraps it up for today. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a wrap, as they
That's a
say.
wrap.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank
Well,
you, Raymond.
thank you, Kyle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time, and thanks for all the listeners. And we'll catch you next time.